I've asked on someone who has worked on 33 Labor election campaigns. I've worked on just 2. Someone who's worked on Bill Shorten's federal campaign 6 years ago. Here's former Queensland Labor Secretary, Cameron Milner. Cameron, great to catch up with you. Look, excuse my bias, right? Now, you're here to put another case, if I've got it wrong, to put me right. To me, the campaign launch felt, as filling as tofu. Albanese has a plan to win the election. Listening to him yesterday, I don't see that he's a plan to actually govern when he does win.
Look, Andrew, I think your analysis of tofu is probably a little mean, but we're used to campaign launches, to be fair, which have a tomahawk steak and mac and cheese on the side. We're used to campaign launches which have big plans and big visions. And that, to be fair, wasn't what was called for. As Mark Butler said, he forewarned it in the Saturday's papers, as the campaign launch stylist, he said this is going to be a campaign launch for the Times. And when you're a small target and you have a small agenda, it does lead to a campaign launch like we saw in Perth yesterday.
No, I've got that, Cameron. That's exactly right. But like I said, I think it's a plan to win an election. But the thing is, you don't then get a mandate to make the big changes. Now, as a Conservative, a Labor government coming in without a mandate to make big changes, I think, well, thank God for that. We've got something we've got some brakes on this outfit. But for a Labor supporter, that must be a huge disappointment.
And that's why I've written in my op-eds, I'm a believer in a big policy agenda. I'm a believer in big change, and that's what Labor governments do. That's what Gough Whitlam did in the years he was there. It's what Bob Hawke did. It's what Kevin Rudd did in the short period of time before Julia Gillard finished him off. They had big agendas. The thing that stresses me is Labor might win the election, but then they've got to win government and how to govern. And really, with a Senate that might be completely fractured like Scott Morrison experienced, and potentially even a hung parliament in the lower house, Labor actually needs a policy agenda that's been passed by the people, which becomes their mandate, because that's the whip hand they have for the next 3 years in Parliament. Because you're right, otherwise, all they get to implement really is what they promised the people. And if that's a small agenda because it was a small target campaign, it might get them across the line on the 21st of May, but for the next 3 years, it doesn't give them much to do.
And Cameron, I reckon that Labor read some of the wrong lessons from Bill Shorten's second election. You were working on the first, you'd left by then. The second one, they all say, oh, what a disaster, he had a big agenda, taxes here, taxes there, whatever, and then it was a sitting duck for Morrison that just blew him apart because it was too much. But I think the wrong lesson is this. He was right to have a big agenda. The elements of the agenda were wrong, the big taxes, etc. If he had the right elements, he would have won, but he didn't. How do you read that? Has Labor read the wrong lessons into the last Shorten defeat?
I believe they have, and I've said that, and I've written about that I don't think the Weatherall and Emerson report actually helped Labor. I think it allowed people who were very happy being a small target, very happy being negative and nasty about the opposition, rather than doing the hard work in opposition of actually coming up with a policy agenda, coming up with grand ideas and a grand vision for Australia. By having a Weatherall and Emerson report that simply said, oh, Shorten got it all wrong, all you have to be is a great opposition rather than a great alternative government, I think that's what we're potentially seeing now with only 3 weeks to go, that it gets you a win in the polls, as Jason Clare says, but it may not win you the seats you need to win government.
Well, I'll give you an example of that just from today. I mean, you're absolutely right that much of the campaign is predicated on abusing Scott Morrison, trading on his unpopularity. In fact, in Albanese's speech yesterday, his big launch speech, a lot of it was about how terrible Morrison was, won't hold a hose and all that, and a lot of slogans. Here again, slogans and no delivery suggested how to make those slogans come to life. Today, have a look at this, where he's talking, Anthony Albanese, to a Labor Day rally in Queensland.
You deserve a government that wants to increase your pay. You deserve a government that wants to give your family cheaper childcare.
So there he goes. You deserve a government that's going to increase your pay, which would be lovely, but where is the plan? I don't see it. And yet, Cameron, as you're suggesting, the polls today, again, 2 of them, show Labor cruising to victory. You've worked on dozens of campaigns. How do you see this election now playing out?
Well, I mean, Mark Latham was ahead at this stage in 2004 and lost to John Howard and lost a swag of seats. So it will come down to these last 3 weeks when voters finally turn on, when obviously people actually turn their attention to who's going to be the next government of Australia and whether they want a majority government, a minority government, or whether they're happy with a hung parliament. That's the voters' choice. In the end, voters over the next 3 weeks, the next 20 days, is going to decide what sort of government we have. And that's why I've said Labor needs a bold agenda. It can't be small target. We need to see the real elbow. We need to see a real agenda for government.
Well, I think we are seeing a real elbow, but I'm not sure it's really, a big policy wonk to start with. I like the bloke, but there you go. But before we went on air, Cameron, you told us the Liberals seem to have an informant in the Labor Party. What did you mean?
This is one of the most curious campaign launches. The centrepiece was about helping 10,000 people in a market that has 600,000 houses and units change a year. So 1 in 60 people you help with that. Yet the PBS announcement, the prescription help that everyone gets across the counter at the pharmacy, would help millions of people. And that surely must have been the centrepiece of the campaign launch speech, until, of course, Scott Morrison announced that on Friday, 48 hours beforehand. And what tipped me off to this was Katy Gallagher, when she was attacking Scott Morrison's announcement, said he must have got wind of this. Yet it was the centrepiece, should have been the centrepiece, of a health-based campaign launch. And so it pricked up my ears. It should have been there in the speech talking about helping millions of people with the cost of living by bringing down the cost at the pharmacy. Yet it was a byline where we added $2.50 to it. What worries me is that campaign launch speeches are closely held documents. These are documents that are held by the leader's office, maybe the deputy leader's office. Richard Marles' office, Penny Wong's office would have been all over it. Yet for something like that to have been announced by the Liberals and spiked Labor's campaign launch makes me worried. I think there's probably been a rat in the rank in terms of this, because it was such a critical and good announcement, yet it was made by Scott Morrison, not by Anthony Albanese.
Very interesting. Cameron Milner, thank you so much indeed for your time.